This short talk is actually about your brain. It weighs 1.5 kilograms, it's got 150 billion nerve cells, and they make on average 1,000 connections each. That means in your brain, watching this, there are trillions of connections. What I want to do is look specifically at the part of your brain which deals with your emotional life, what we call the limbic brain or the social cognition system. Social because it's about socializing, cognition because it's about thinking or understanding the emotions that go with that socializing. And don't forget that we socialize internally with ourselves as well as with other people in the world around us. So let's look at a cutaway of the brain which specifically shows us this system called the limbic system. What I want to do first is work our way through all the various structures in the limbic system so you have an understanding, I hope, of how complex this network is. And remember at all times that this is what's going on inside your brain, even watching this video. The first structure I want to look at is called the amygdala. The amygdala is your basic survival structure. It's there to keep you alive and functioning, irrespective of anybody or anything else. It's very much in the present. Your right amygdala is constantly surveying the environment for threat or reward. If it sees threat or reward, it has 3 responses. Hit it, take it, run from it. It's an ancient structure. It has no concept of consequence. It doesn't know anything about the past or the future. It has no morality. It has no ethics. Its job is to keep you surviving and happening irrespective of anything or anybody else. Slightly higher up the food chain are a set of structures called a septate nucleus. Septate nucleus are your first structures that start to make choices about what you do. They can stop the amygdala dead in its tracks and say, well, not just yet. Next in line, getting more complex as we move up the food chain, is your hippocampi. One in each hemisphere. They're rather beautiful C-shaped structures, and they have 2 main functions in your life. The first is to deal with your short-term memory. So if you remember stuff from this talk or from your training, then that's your hippocampus that's doing that for you. But their second job, which is perhaps in many ways more profound, is their ability to relate together events, particularly with their emotional context. So a classic example of your hippocampus being involved is walking into a kitchen on a sunny Sunday morning. Toast is being made, lovely smell of toast, sun streaming in through the window, and for most people that will associate them with doing the same thing when they were a child, and mum was up early doing all the hard work whilst you lay about in bed. Next in line, once again more complex again, is this green structure in this diagram. This is the back part of it, posterior cingulate gyrus. And here's the front part of it, anterior, just means front, cingulate gyrus. Posterior cingulate gyrus, that's to do with instincts, with dealing with things that are not quite conscious. Oh, I've got that feeling but can't quite explain it level. Anterior cingulate, fully conscious brain. That's where you start to do stuff around, oh, I'm feeling angry, why am I feeling angry? I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling happy, why am I feeling these emotions? And developing an understanding for these, as well as setting this broader understanding of the emotional place that you are when you're in a situation. Higher level of functioning again, and perhaps the highest level of functioning in your brain, is the very front of your frontal cortex. Also includes, as you can see, the anterior cingulate gyrus. This is complex brain. This is where you carry conscience, morality, ethics, your personality, and it's where you make complex choices about social interaction. Classic example of what your frontal cortex gets up to is not taking the last chocolate. Now, not taking the last chocolate, your amygdala is saying, come on, grab it, take it, we want that. Your septates start to introduce some control in that, but your frontal cortex is making complex choices about that. If you don't take the last chocolate, and you do it in such a way that mummy notices, then on your way home in the car, hopefully she'll stop at the garage and get you a bottle of juice and some large chocolate bar, which is much better. So you've learnt behaviors that increase your reward by delaying gratification. Critical part of what we call emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is awareness of your own feelings and emotions, awareness of other people's feelings and emotions, and the ability to deal with those two things constructively. Well and good, complex system. You can see it contains a number of different structures that all work together and probably take up about 30% of the volume of your hemisphere to help you create that complex emotional responsiveness that's required to deal with your own feelings and emotions, but also other people's feelings and emotions. So let's now think about how it develops and matures from birth up until young adulthood. You can only be as old as your brain has reached neurobiologically. Very interesting statement, because it makes one, I hope, stop and think about, who is this individual in front of me? What age have they emotionally reached in their brain? Because that's the only age they can be emotionally. If they haven't matured beyond that, well, they can't be more than that. The first structure that comes online after birth is your amygdalas. Remember, there's one in each hemisphere. And their job, as we've said, is basic survival. And they dominate behavior till 8 to 9 months of age to make sure that you get nurtured, that you get fed, that you get cleaned, all those things. And we now understand that that driving need of the amygdala is so you grow a normal brain in all its architecture and function. About 8 to 9 months of age, these structures, the septate nuclei, come online. And the septate's job is to start calming the amygdala's need for instant gratification down. They inhibit the amygdala. And by doing that, they allow you to start making choices. We know that about 8 or 9 months of age, human children usually become mobile if they're developing on the ordinary pathway. And it's probably a basic survival thing, the septate coming online, because this is ancient neurobiology, millions and millions of years old. In the cave, if you were starting to crawl around or bum shuffle or whatever you were doing, if you bumped into the ankles of some angry alpha male sitting at the fire, one of his possible responses would be to pick you up by the ankles and whack your brains out against a rock. That's not a very good survival choice, and we know that about 8 to 9 months of age, an ordinarily developing human child will start to make choices about who they get nurturing from. They start to recognize strangers and have fear of strangers. That relationship between septate and amygdala matures over the next couple of years, and then at about 2, 2.5, 3 years of age, this great big lump of frontal cortex with its great big mass of limbic brain comes online, and it also connects directly into the amygdala to inhibit it further. Now, this is a completely different ball game from what's gone before. Amygdala, deeply unconscious structure, Freud's id, as we've said. Septate, sort of a pre-conscious structure. But once you get into frontal lobe, this is fully conscious brain, where we're making these complex choices, as I've said, about not taking the last chocolate. And it's capable of doing that because it can inhibit what the amygdala is getting up to in terms of hit it, take it, or run from it. And it can make these complex, learnt choices about what's likely to end up with the biggest reward or escape the worst punishment.